Hello, and welcome to Combo Breakdown! Today we're talking about another viewer-submitted combo, Eye of the Storm. And if you have a combo you want to see a video on, comment down below or tweet me at King of Jank on Twitter. So, Eye of the Storm is a blue enchantment for 5 and 2 blue that says whenever a player plays an instant or sorcery card, remove it from the game. Then that player copies each instant or sorcery card removed from the game with Eye of the Storm for each copy that player may cast the card without paying its mana cost. So this is pretty crazy, and you're already probably thinking of ways you can win with this card. Ritual effects mean every time you play an instant or sorcery you make mana. Growth Spiral can let you play a land and draw a card off each instant. Lightning Bolt means you deal damage with every cast. Or Gutter Snipe pings opponents for each copy you cast from Eye of the Storm. Yeah, that's a key part of the card. Those copies you make from Eye of the Storm, you cast them. So you also get any cast effects that go along with them. But for now, let's look at all the crazy things you can do with Eye of the Storm in a mono blue deck. First off, since this is a universal effect, you may want to be careful with what you put into the storm, because an opponent could easily cast an instant spell and use all those spells against you, so just keep that in mind. But to truly combo off with the storm, you need to be able to continually cast spells. And to do so, you need spells in your hand and mana. So, Card Drawer Tutors work great with Eye of the Storm. Merchant Scroll can search for a blue instant spell and put it into your hand, while Frantic Search lets you draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and untap 3 lands. Which means you get 3 free mana every time you cast a spell, which can actually get you unlimited mana if you play low cost spells. Tap 3 lands to play a spell that costs less than 3 mana, like Opt, and the copy of Frantic Search will untap those 3 lands, netting you 2 additional mana. Really, the main objective with Eye of the Storm is to be able to continually cast instant and sorcery cards that get eaten up by the storm and allow you to continue benefiting off the copy spells. So a card like Knowledge Exploitation is great for this, as it lets you search an opponent's deck for an instant or sorcery and then lets you cast that card for free. This means you can loop the storm continually from spells in your opponent's deck, because every time you cast an instant or sorcery card, you get a copy of Knowledge Exploitation. Similar cards that can do this are Stolen Goods and Talented the Telepath, but both of them have a chance to miss an instant or sorcery, so they're not as reliable. Counter spells also aren't horrible in the Storm either. Now, you don't have to play every copy of a spell that was exiled with Eye of the Storm, since it is a May ability, but it may be worthwhile to play some and then counter them with a counter spell that gives you additional effects, like Rewind that will untap 4 lands, or Spell Shift that lets you play the next instant or sorcery card on top of your deck, allowing you to loop the storm again. Discontinuity is one of those cards you probably want to counter with Spell Shift on your turn, because it just ends the turn. But you can use it to lock out your opponents on their turn. When the copies are made with Eye of the Storm, you get to decide the order they go on the stack, so if you put Discontinuity on the stack first, you can resolve all the other copies and then resolve Discontinuity last, ending your opponent's turn but getting the benefit of all other spells. And speaking of locking your opponents out, any extra turn spell like Time Warp can effectively lock your opponents out, because every instant and sorcery you cast will give you an additional turn. So as long as you have an instant or sorcery to cast on your turn, you'll keep getting extra turns. Teferi Mage Zalfir and Lil Teferi can also lock people out with Eye of the Storm. Your opponents can't cast instant or sorceries because these 2 Teferis only let opponents cast spells at sorcery speed. So if you control one of the Teferis and Eye of the Storm, you get to continue on as normal, but every instant and sorcery your opponents play get exiled into Eye of the Storm, and then they can't cast any of the copies. This is because you cast the copies as Eye of the Storm is still resolving, and sorcery speed is defined as when the stack is empty. Since the stack isn't empty, your opponents can't cast those copies. Also, Lavinia's second ability locks out opponents with Eye of the Storm. But the best way to make your opponents scoop with disgust with Eye of the Storm is to pair it with Mind's Desire, a 6-cost sorcery spell that says shuffle your library and then exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you can play that card without paying its mana cost. And it also has Storm, which means that you copy the spell for every other spell that was cast before it this turn. So, if Mind Desire is the first card you cast this turn, Storm doesn't trigger, and Mind's Desire gets exiled into Eye of the Storm. Then, you make copies of all the other spells in Eye of the Storm, so if you have 3 spells, you can stack them so you cast the other 2 copied spells, and then you cast your copy of Mind's Desire. Well, Storm triggers then, and you get 3 more copies of Mind's Desire. 1 for the first time you cast Mind's Desire that got exiled, and then 1 for each of the other Eye of the Storm copies that you cast. So you get 4 Mind's Desires on the stack. Each of those exile the top card of your library, and if you get an instant or sorcery spell in those 4 cards, you can do the whole process again, except this time you'll get even more copies of Mind's Desire. Speaking of Storm, Brain Freeze is another Storm card that makes a player mill 3 cards, also with the Storm effect. So by looping your Eye of the Storm combos, you can literally storm off and mill your opponents out. If you're in 2 or more colors, you can also kill with Grape Shot and Tendrils of Agony, again to storm off and kill your opponents. The fact that you cast those copied spells with Eye of the Storm is really powerful, and I'm sure you'll find tons of ways to abuse it, like with Talran, Sky Summoner, who makes a 2/2 Flying Drake whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. Anyways, I'll leave it up to you guys to find even more crazier strategies out there in the other colors. But for now, that was a very brief description of how to use Eye of the Storm. I'd always appreciate a like and sub if you'd be so kind, and let me know down below if you have ever had the joy of playing with Eye of the Storm. And of course, when you need another combo, come back here to Combo Breakdown.